Welcome to another season of the Dish with Dina podcast, everyone. I am Dina D'Alessandro, registered dietitian, nutritionist, founder, and chief executive life changer at Dish with Dina, and I'm also your host. It is great to be back with season 7. As I mentioned in the final episode of season 6, I'm going to be moving slightly into a different direction from this point forward. While I'll still be doing guest interviews, our focus is going to be on a weekly topic or theme, an awareness topic or theme, to provide you with some subject matter expertise, whether it's from my own experience and knowledge or someone else's. Then it'll also tie into what I'm discussing in my monthly wellness webinars, or what I'm writing in my blog posts and my social media posts, so that there's more of a cohesive feel to everything. Before I begin, I'm going to share another change in format here, because for those of you who are listening to this audio podcast, you are none the wiser, but I am switching this up this season, and I'm also doing a video version of the podcast just to hit a bunch of different platforms. Not everybody likes to listen to things. Sometimes they like to watch things. So if you are watching this, I'm going to try to normalize a couple of things for you. Number one, I do not have a fancy studio. Sometimes I am in my New York City apartment, in my home office, or in a room somewhere that could be quite noisy, and you've never seen me in that before. And so, again, you were none the wiser of what's going on behind the scenes. So I might not have been camera ready. In times like this right now, for those of you who are watching this episode, I am traveling. So I'm in a different location, a different home, a different environment. I don't love the blur option on some of these video recording software systems. So I've opted just to leave my background as is, whatever. I'm okay with it if you are. And I'm also testing out some software audio podcasting things. So you'll have to bear with me as I transition and try to learn a little bit more about different kinds of equipment and different podcasting recording things that I'm working out here. This week, our focus is going to be on diabetes. It's very near and dear to my heart. I work in outpatient clinical and community settings, and I actually specialize in diabetes prevention and management, which I've been doing for the past 7 years that I've been a dietitian. I think I can confidently say that I've probably at this point worked with thousands of patients who've had this diagnosis or have been told that they are at risk for something. If you are diagnosed with this condition, been told you're at risk for it, or whatever the issue may be, maybe you have a loved one who is living with diabetes, maybe you're just curious to learn a little bit more about this condition. Hopefully, what I share with you in this podcast can help you gain a better understanding of what to do and where to go. My mission has always been to help you embrace and develop new relationships with food, but I also want to help you build your confidence and empower you on how to manage your health. However, before I get into all of that, I want to disclaim, and I am probably not going to say this every single episode, it'll just be written in the notes, but while I am a registered dietitian, I am not your registered dietitian. So the information that I share in these episodes is intended for your general knowledge and not meant to be a substitute for medical advice. Obviously, I want to make sure that you're going to your regular practitioners, your healthcare providers, if you need any advice or treatment for specific medical conditions. Make sure that you're seeking prompt, qualified medical care for any specific health issues. Consult your physician, other healthcare providers before you start any kind of self-directed treatment. I also want to take a moment just to explain, because it's been a while since I've done this, about what a registered dietitian is or does. And in the United States, a registered dietitian has a degree in science. Right now, as of the time of this recording, in the year of 2023, it is now a mandate that we have to have a master's degree in science. Some of us have master's degrees in other things. I have a master's degree of science in nutrition, and that we are trained in all aspects of food and nutrition, including what's known as a very specific approach to dietitians called medical nutrition therapy, which means that we educate and we counsel our patients to help them manage their chronic conditions. So we utilize whatever educational tools that we have to teach them about their conditions, food and nutrition modifications, et cetera. But we also take a counseling approach to help them overcome boundaries, help them with goal setting. So that's a bit of a unique situation for us as dietitians than, say, prescribing medicine or just meeting with people, giving them an overview of what their lab results are and then sending them on their way. We are credentialed by the Commission on Dietetic Registration. We spend at least 1,200 hours in a dietetic internship through an accredited program. There are currently about 112,000 registered dietitians in the United States. About half of us work in hospital settings, clinics, doctors' offices, and things like extended care or long-term care facilities or nursing homes. But so many of us also work in other settings or do other things like I do. I work in private practice. Some of us work in research. Some of us are specialized in things like sports nutrition or academia, whether like me, I'm a teacher, or if somebody's working in a different directory, or I should say a director's position overseeing a department of health and wellness or health sciences. So just to let you know that when it comes to the terminology, all dietitians are nutritionists. So you may hear us interchange those titles or use them together in our title when we call ourselves, not to make the title any longer, but to call ourselves registered dietitian nutritionists or RDNs, but not all nutritionists are dietitians. So a registered dietitian is a nationally protected title. But in certain states here in the United States, in certain states, there is no title protection, no required education, no required experience or qualifications for anyone who wants to call themselves a nutritionist. So please be sure when you are working with somebody in the health and wellness arena, in the profession, that you do inquire with them about what their credentials and experience might be. Because quite honestly, even though some people in the health and wellness world might have some form of training or have taken a certification course in something, quite literally anybody can call themselves a nutritionist and have that be done with that. All right, so I just wanted to give you a little background about that before we dive into today's topic. And I'm going to not make these excruciatingly long, so you have to forgive me for just this intro part that I'm getting through as we kick off season 7. Every one of these episodes, either I will be speaking on some sort of topic or I'll be bringing in a guest and they will be speaking on some sort of topic. So today we're going to focus on diabetes. I'm going to share with you a little bit of a background of what you might need to know about this. Some misinformation that exists out there, I'll try to clarify, but I really encourage you, if you can and if you want to go off into following me on other platforms like my social media accounts or on my website. I do blog a lot on there too. I also have a mailing list. Everything is linked in this episode, and you'll get a lot more in-depth information there. And of course, if you are dealing with this condition, you can always reach out to me to schedule a counseling session. I might not be able to see you depending on what state you live in or what health insurance you might have, but I can always send you in the right direction with some additional information in a more formal setting. So kicking off with the types of diabetes that you have to be aware of, there's 3 main types. The first one is known as type 1 diabetes. We also call this diabetes mellitus. So you might see it written as T1D or T1DM. This is an autoimmune condition. It is early onset. It used to be actually known as juvenile diabetes, where your body, your pancreas, the thing that is the organ that creates insulin for us, it ends up making no insulin or very, very little, that it can't help the body do its job with being able to manage blood sugar levels. So somebody who is dealing with type 1 diabetes is going to be on a lifelong insulin treatment. And if you want to learn a little bit more about that, you can always check out my blog post, or you can go into coming soon, my selfless promotion of my online courses, which dives a little deeper into all of this stuff. But this is going to be something that is medicine specific. Okay, you were reliant on this, otherwise your body cannot accommodate, and you cannot function if you don't have insulin. Just as an FYI, the kinds of insulin can be a little bit different. So if you're dealing with something like this, or you know somebody who is, there's injectable insulin, there's pump version of it. Some of these are animal based, some of these are synthetic. There is human insulin as well. And there are also things called insulin analogs. So again, all of these things have to do with the way that things are prescribed. Everybody reacts and utilizes different things, or different people have different needs for different things. So that would be something that would be given to them by their doctors. When it comes to diabetes in general, the doctor that you're going to, the specialist, is known as an endocrinologist, because endocrinologists work with our hormones, and insulin is a hormone. The next type of diabetes is kind of the more well-known one. It's very lifestyle related as far as what we see here in the States. It's known as type 2 diabetes. This is more of an adult onset after we go through our lives. A lot of things end up, maybe getting disrupted in our bodies, or we are dealing with a lot of environmental factors or other lifestyle factors that end up putting some excess pressure on our body and the ability to make insulin. So we are still making insulin, but our body becomes a little bit more what's known as resistant or sensitive to that uptake, and the blood sugar levels in our body can increase as a result. So this is adult onset, but in America, we're starting to see more children being diagnosed with this. So again, just because you're younger doesn't automatically mean it's an autoimmune disease like type 1. That's something that is a condition that will be chronic. And for the most part, unfortunately, diabetes is a a disease that you cannot necessarily, and I'm gonna get people fighting me on this, but you can't cure diabetes. You can put it in remission for type 2. Type 1 is going to be with you lifelong, and that again is reliant on medicine in order for you to be able to take care of it. Number 3, the third type of diabetes that we see here in this category is known as gestational diabetes, and that is diabetes while someone is pregnant. It can usually go away after the childbirth occurs, but it could also end up causing an increase either of getting type 2 after the birth for both the pregnant person, and also increasing the risk of the baby getting type 2 diabetes later in life. I think it's a small percentage though. I used to work in high risk OBGYN in the very first 4 years of my career as a dietitian, and I think it was in maybe the single or double digits that risk can happen. But again, we have ways to hopefully help people prevent that, or at least manage it in a way that would reduce that risk. So let's talk a little bit about diabetes prevention. For somebody with type 1 diabetes, not much can be done. You're either born with this, there's a genetic anomaly, or maybe there was an issue with an infection or a virus that ended up attacking the pancreas, and that kind of destroyed the beta cells, the cells that are needed in order to create that insulin. And when that happens, there's no prevention. Like I said, it's all reliant on medicine from that point forward. With type 2, what you're working with, again, here, if you are at risk for it, where you would be diagnosed with what's known as pre-diabetes, or if your lab results are a little bit higher in that abnormal range, that value, then that would be full on type 2 diabetes. You can go into remission. I'm going to keep saying this. Like I said, I know some people think they can cure it. It is not. Your body could be more susceptible, or it's like a work in progress for you to make sure that that remission remains. So that can be achieved through lifestyle changes or medical intervention. So what I usually tell people is your doctor and you will have that discussion, either your primary care physician, or if you're getting referred to an endocrinologist, they will make that decision with you, whether or not you need to be put on medicine, depending on how abnormal your ranges are. There's a lot of issues when you have uncontrolled diabetes, that there can be massive amounts of complications where, again, I won't go too much into detail in this episode, but you can have complications like blood doesn't get to the extremities. And one of the biggest things could be something like an amputation if you have massively uncontrolled diabetes. But if you're applying some lifestyle changes, meaning if you're making some food and nutrition modifications, if you're getting out and being physically active however best you can, there's also research that shows even things like sleep and stress can affect our blood sugar levels, because it's all hormonal. Everything is related in your body. So the application of how we consider modifying your diet in particular has to do with carbohydrates, right? We have 3 different types of macronutrients when we eat food that provides us with calories or energy. That is carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. And people tend to immediately become really nervous about taking in carbohydrates. And I'm here to tell you, you don't have to get rid of everything. And I also want to acknowledge that in a more cultural aspect, that in a global way, rice and grain-based foods are staple items in a lot of people's diets and their cultures and their heritage and their traditional food ways. So we don't want anybody having to completely get rid of all of the carbohydrates that exist. But what we do end up telling people to do is creating some sort of balance, right? Making sure that there is representation there, because when we eat carbohydrates, that is an immediate source of energy, something that we want to utilize very quickly. And because of that, it can spike our blood sugar very quickly within about 1 to 2 hours of consuming that. When you're pairing up your foods, you're creating a little bit more of a balanced diet. You're introducing protein-based foods and healthy fats, everything kind of evens out and slows the roll. Ideally. Also with timing of things too. So not necessarily eating on an empty stomach everything your largest meal. I know in America a lot of people tend to skip breakfast. A lot of people go for very long periods of time throughout the day, especially since I work with a variety of people both in the professional world but also in the academic world. We have students who go into classes from 10 in the morning to 8 o'clock at night, and they go without any food, or they think they can't take breaks and eat something during the day. And what that ends up happening is that when you do finally sit down to have a meal, your blood sugar kind of comes rushing in to counteract the effects of what the food is doing in your digestive and metabolism system. So it's trying to, balance everything out and send the food off, the molecules off in the direction in which they need to be. Obviously, I'm explaining this in a very simple matter. Science, if you want to learn more about it, you can always reach out, and I can share with you some of these online courses that I'm creating, or you can watch one of my webinars because they go into a lot more detail. Understanding the nuances with that too. Everybody is unique. A lot of times what I hear and what I want to encourage you to do if you're dealing with this as a risk factor, or if you've been diagnosed with prediabetes or type 2, is find out from your doctor how you might monitor that. Not everybody gets told to go home and do those finger sticks where they're going to be checking their blood sugars immediately after eating and keeping a log of some sort. So if you have no way of knowing what your blood sugar is doing, but your doctor is telling you to make modifications in your food and your maybe physical activity, I would highly recommend you asking them to please refer you to a dietitian. A dietitian can help monitor that with you and give you a little bit more specific guidance to your own unique needs. Because without logging anything, if you don't know what your blood sugar is doing, more likely than not, your doctor will probably tell you to come back in 3 months and do another blood test and see if anything has altered. But you might not know exactly if any of those modifications are correct. It could be a toss up. Again, like I said, tying in with other lifestyle factors like stress and sleep and physical activity, smoking, anything like this, that can also throw off your hormones. So maybe when you go back to the doctor, the lab results are better or equal or worse. And maybe it's because of the changes that you try to make through your diet nutrition modifications. So I'm always going to pitch for you to meet with a registered dietitian, even if it's just to give you some education and knowledge and understanding of how to better meal plan. If you are working or dealing with gestational diabetes, this is something that obviously a lot of people that I've worked with feel like they probably take a little bit more seriously, because it's not just them who are being affected by this diagnosis, it's now also their baby. And so in this case, a lot of the other things for type 2 apply when it comes to gestational diabetes as well, with the inclusion of that if you are not managing your diabetes diagnosis while pregnant, and again, this could be done through medicine depending on what your doctor's office says, or I should say your healthcare provider says, and or if they decide to let you just work through food modifications, nutrition modifications, and then come back and check again if any of your numbers are looking better. But my point was that we have something known as fetal macrosomia, meaning that in the world of pregnancy, your baby runs on glucose. So glucose is the broken down sugar form of carbohydrates. When you eat foods that contain carbs, and carbs is quite literally in almost everything you can think of except for animal meats or muscle meats, that your body is going to break down, send off those molecules in the direction of whatever you need as a form of energy, but then you're also feeding your baby through that as well. And so if you're eating in excess of your carbohydrates, or if your blood sugar is not able to be managed and then the excess goes to your baby, you could end up with a large size baby. So we don't want you ending up delivering that baby and potentially messing with your pelvic floor, or the baby tries to get pushed through natural childbirth and the baby ends up with things like shoulder dystocia or anything else that potentially could complicate the physical well-being of both the pregnant person and the baby as well. So a lot of things to kind of take into consideration. And I said earlier too that even though I had kind of a large introduction to this episode, I'm just giving you a little sneak peek into some of these topics. If you are interested in learning more, you can always go to my website. You can follow me on all the things across the social media platforms, everything which is going to be linked here in this episode, and check out some of the things that we've either done already or things that are coming up, like our free monthly webinars, or we have some online courses that we are going to be launching in January of 2024, depending on when you're listening to this. They may or may not already be out, where we have an affordable, self-paced online course that provides you with 4 weeks worth of modules, a little bit more in detail of whatever the topic is. So in this case, go and look for the one on pre-diabetes, type 1 or type 2 diabetes or gestational diabetes. They're all very specific to what the unique needs and that particular condition are. And you can learn a little bit more about those things. The online courses, and maybe even by listening to this episode too, help empower you and advocate for you to ask the right questions when you're at the doctor's office. So again, I'm always going to advocate for the value of working with a dietitian. We are uniquely qualified to help you with all of that. We also are getting better at removing some of our biases, because sometimes there are issues or certain conditions that people come along with when they're dealing with diabetes that, depending on who you might be working with, your healthcare provider might not be as sensitive to that. And so hopefully working with a dietitian can help put your mind at ease. We can give you a little bit more of a customized meal plan to follow, a little bit more insight into the things that you're already eating so that you don't feel like you have to completely get rid of everything, and then work with you on a more regular basis to see what's working, what's not working. A lot of times when you're dealing with these new diagnoses on how to figure out, what do I do now with this condition? It's going to be with me for life, or maybe it's a temporary situation I'm going to take control over. It's trial and error, and that can feel really, frustrating, challenging, scary sometimes, but working with a dietitian can help put your mind at ease, hopefully, and again, give you some guidance so you can see some success and set up some short-term goals that lead to long-term success as well in helping you manage your condition. If you enjoyed this podcast, leave a comment, interact with us at the DishWithDina crew, the headquarters. Again, I'm linking everything here that I think would be helpful and useful for you. I'm still getting used to doing this episode in the video format and in the audio format, so please bear with me and be kind as I navigate this new format. I very much hope that this was helpful, and I look forward to sharing some more information with you in the next episode.